Hi, it's Lucy here, and I've just been teaching the first of our director's course for Aldeburgh Library Foundation. We just had week one, and we looked at Powell and Pressburger, two wonderful directors who worked predominantly in the 1940s and 1950s. And the purpose of this little YouTube video is something I'll be trying to do every week, which is for the benefit of people who weren't there, just to catch up on what we talked about, but also to consolidate a bit of what we discussed to help it sink in a little bit. It was a lot of talking in the session today. It was partly because it was week one, but quite a lot of ideas and thoughts around the films came up. We looked at 4 films. We looked at The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp from 1943, I Know Where I'm Going, 1945, Matter of Life and Death, 1946, and Black Narcissus, 1947. All very different, and that was one of the things we discussed about Powell and Pressburger, is that they've managed to turn their hands to a remarkable range of films across their whole repertoire. Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, the main takeaway points really were that the film was filmed in the heat of war itself, actually during the middle of the war. And it was about, to some degree, the rituals and the experience of war and who does it and what's the point of it, who are you fighting, who's the stranger that you're fighting. Because against the backdrop of the war is a friendship between an Englishman and a German who managed to maintain this very beautiful friendship, really, across the 2 world wars and out the others, and hopefully out the other side, although we don't even know that at the end. And the scenes we looked at really looked at the mechanics and the rituals of war, how it's set up, how it's established, and the absurdity of it in many cases. And this is previewed in a duel scene when the English character Wincandy and Theo, the German, first meet, and they have an elaborate duel to take part in for various reasons. And the whole scene is set up with the preamble to the duel. It goes on for a very long time, and the rules and the positioning, and it's all done incredibly correctly. And this is all built up and built up and built up, and then you never even actually see the fight. And what they do just before they leave the fight is to focus on huge close-ups of the 2 men's faces to show actually there's all this ritual, but really there's 2 people in a room, and these 2 people form this remarkable relationship that endures throughout the whole film and throughout these conflicts. Interestingly, also, they both fall in love effectively with the same woman. It's not the same character, but the female character, 3 female characters in the film, are all played by Deborah Kerr, which makes for a very interesting dynamic. Then we looked at I Know Where I'm Going, beautiful Scottish romance, and what we looked at in that was the playing out of Joan Webster's desire to marry a businessman and be Lady Beringer and be rich, against the real lives, effectively, of the islanders in Scotland that she encounters. She is thwarted in her mission to travel to Killoran to marry this rich gentleman and actually meet somebody who is real and authentic, for whom she develops tremendous feelings. We also look at the extent to which she is prepared to go, the lengths that she's prepared to go to achieve her goal, which potentially might even mean risking other people's lives, these real people's lives. She's often seen elevated above in shots. She's looking up, looking down on other people. By the end, she is levelled and brought into the real world. Then we looked at A Matter of Life and Death quite briefly, because that had been shown by Aldeburgh Cinema, and looked principally at the contrast, the famous contrast between the colour and the black and white, but also the question of what's real and what isn't, and how that is represented in the first, say, 15-20 minutes of the film. And the use of colour, not just Technicolor versus black and white, but red. And red, we found, is huge across all of Powell and Pressburger's films, the colour films. So we looked at the representation of heaven, that's never given that specific name. And again, rather like Colonel Blimp, against this huge conflict, Matter of Life and Death was filmed just after the war, of the immense losses, international losses, that everybody effectively then ends up in the same place, where everyone is the same, everyone has the same status. And then back on Earth, it's just about 2 people who've fallen in love and what happens to them and how important that is. And later on in the film, somebody says, you know, on Earth nothing is stronger than love. And that really is, it comes through very strongly in the film. Finally, Black Narcissus, completely different from matter of life and death in presentation and in storyline, but with this wonderful heightened sense of reality. A quote we used from Andrew Moore's book on Powell and Pressburger, which uses the term magic, talks about their magic spaces. He uses the phrase reality as banished in their films, and it's a lovely way of thinking about them, that they're not often to be taken literally. The films are about real human things, but reality, in a way, just takes a back step in everything that they do. And Black Narcissus was filmed at Pinewood Studios, but was painted, these beautiful backdrops painted to look like the Himalayas, which is where this order of nuns has set up in a former palace that used to be a house of women, like a harem. And they get, as in many other Powell and Pressburger films, very much affected by the landscape that they are in. And they, in various ways, start to lose their grip on their faith and their order and their reason for being there. Almost their rituals become meaningless, and they start to lose the plot and lose their sense, their grip on time and order and all sorts of things. One sister in particular, Sister Ruth, is ill when she arrives, is mentally unstable, and becomes even more so. She becomes fixated on the agent who works in the area, Mr. Dean, to the extent where she falls in love with him. She then transfers her fixation to Sister Clodagh, who she believes is thwarting this romance, and who Mr. Dean in fact does love. And it ends badly for Sister Ruth, but the whole film gradually moves from a rather austere looking, lots of whites and the very orderly habits of the nuns, gradually moves colour palette into this very dark and horrifying final few sequences before the final scene, in which Sister Ruth's madness is absolutely painted into the filmic landscape, is written on the screen into it. So that was Powell and Pressburger. Next week we are looking at Kathryn Bigelow, completely different type of filmmaker, but also some interesting things to say about things that are real versus things that are artificial, or things that are staged, things that are very filmic versus things that may be real. But she's also very interested in looking at masculinity from her female director's perspective, so we will look at that. And we will also reveal the results of the Week 5 referendum, in which we've chosen the director to look at for Week 5. So I hope you've enjoyed this short film. Leave any comments if you'd like below, and we will catch up again in a week's time. Well, on Wednesday, the 7th of November. Bye for now.